This video is the third of our unit in Unit 6, and it's all about writing equations. So we've mostly been talking about expressions. Now we're going to start talking about equations, which means there is an equal sign in the middle of the problem. So this is the TEK that we're looking at, is 6.9a, and we're just practicing writing one variable, one-step equations to represent constraints or conditions within a problem. So these are some words that you need to be able to know and understand. So equation, obviously, coefficient, variable, constant, condition, and constraint. These are the ones that are particular to this video. But then also there are a bunch of other ones that we talked about previously in 6.1 and 6.2. So just make sure that you are familiar with all the vocabulary. So first I just want to clarify real quickly the parts of an expression, because these are some words that are over here in the vocabulary section, like coefficient, constant. Just want to make sure you understand what those mean. So this is an expression, and I know that because there's no equal sign. We're pretty familiar with operations as just adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing. So in this situation, we have an addition sign. A variable is just a letter. Lots of times it is the letter X is used in algebra. And so a variable just represents some unknown value. And so really this represents something, but we don't know what it is right now. And then a number that is always with the variable, these are basically, since they're right next to each other, they are being multiplied by each other, really. And so this number here in orange, the 3, is called a coefficient. So think about like a coach or like a co-teacher or something, is somebody who's with another person. So this 3 is a coefficient, meaning it goes with the variable. And then a number without any variables is called a constant, because this is never ever going to change. It's always going to stay plus 5. Over here, if I change this variable to 2, 2 times 3 is 6. If I did it to 4, 4 times 3 is 12. So this term over here can change depending on what the variable value is. But 5 is just a constant. There is no variable. So that is just the parts of an expression, so you're familiar with those words. So equations we've talked about have an equal sign, and constraints or conditions are basically like guidelines or restrictions that are given to you in the problem. So we're going to practice translating a problem situation to an algebraic one-step equation with just one variable represented. So here is our first example. The first one says Sarah pays $8 per month for her streaming subscription. So like Netflix or something like that. She has $120 in her bank account. Write an equation to represent the number of months represented by X. So X is the variable we're going to use to represent how many months she can continue her streaming subscription with the money in her account. So you guys already have some practice doing this, where you're just pulling out the important parts of the problem, like what are they telling you, what are you trying to look for. So the main things I have highlighted, I tried to color code it for you. So $8 times the number of months, which is going to be represented by X. So this becomes 8 times X. So if it's 2 months, I'm spending $16. If it's 5 months, I'm spending $40. I'm just multiplying the number of months times 8. And that has to equal the total in her bank account, because if she only has $120, we want to know how many months can she sit here and actually subscribe to Netflix. So right now we're not worried so much about solving it. We're just writing the equation. We want to practice taking this word problem and translating it into an algebraic equation. So I just put 8 times X. X is the variable that represents the number of months, and I'm setting that equal to 120. And then if I were to solve this, which we'll talk about in later videos, then that's going to tell me how many months I can actually subscribe to the streaming subscription, whatever it is, like Netflix or Hulu or whatever. So here's another example. Not all of them are going to be multiplication. So this one, I also notice how I represented 8 and X with no symbol in between, because remember, kind of like with parentheses, if things are just right next to each other, we assume it's multiplication. So this is very often how you're going to see things in pre-algebra and algebra represented, and it means multiply if there's nothing in between there. So the second example says the weight of a suitcase cannot exceed just means it can't be more than 50 pounds. You're going to go on a trip and your empty suitcase is 8.5 pounds. Write an equation to represent the amount of weight, and we're going to use the variable W, that can still be packed. So what can still be put inside the suitcase, but it can't go over 50 pounds. So I know if the empty suitcase is 8.5 pounds, 8.5, whatever I add, the W, whatever weight I add to it when I pack, has to be equal to 50, so that way I'm not going over 50 pounds. So this right here is our equation for this situation, okay? Now I want you to try, so Mrs. M has 84 pencils at the start of the semester. Every week she gives 7 students a pencil. Write an equation that represents the number of weeks, using the variable W, that Mrs. M can give students a pencil. So I want you to try on your own writing an equation. So these are going to take you maybe a couple of minutes to think it through and actually write it down. So these are not supposed to be something you can immediately do in 5 seconds. So don't get discouraged if it's supposed to require you to think, is what I'm saying. So just like slow down, pull out the important parts. I already kind of helped you with that. So when we're trying to set up our equation, I know that I have 7 pencils every week. The number of weeks is represented by a W, and it needs to equal 84 total pencils. So basically, you just need to figure out, am I multiplying, am I subtracting, am I adding, am I dividing, what operation is being used to set up the equation. So I want you to try it, put it in your notes that you're taking right now, and bring them to class next time so that we can double check and make sure that you did it correctly. So by the time you come to class, or at the end of this video, basically, you need to know what the difference is between an expression and an equation. There's one thing: an expression does not have an equal sign, an equation does. Otherwise, they're pretty similar. And then also just know how you write an equation based on a problem situation. So you need to be able to start translating word problems into equations. So this was pretty short and sweet. Make sure you bring your notes. I would definitely have the vocabulary written down and the examples written down, just so that way you have it. But bring any questions and notes you have to class, and we'll talk about it next time. Thanks for watching.